Listen to the first detail. The burned phone has no battery, no SIM tray, and no working speaker. At 0209, it leaves a voicemail. Not after a warning, not after someone opens the file. Before any of that, the record is already wrong. This is a Bureau of Lost Signals case file, original fiction, reconstructed like an archive recording. The case is called The Voicemail Came from a Burned Phone. At the center is a burned phone, an impossible voicemail, and a sealed evidence bag that records its listeners. No gore, no easy monster, just timestamps, witness notes, and one mistake the file keeps making on purpose. It should be explainable. Not yet. The first version sounds like damaged equipment. The second sounds like coincidence. The third sounds like it knows who is listening. The file does not begin with a monster. It begins with a burned phone sealed in a clear evidence bag, ordinary enough to be ignored until the timestamps start contradicting the room. The technician says the bag felt warm before the message played, like the phone had been holding its breath. Then the pattern changes. The first impossible detail is ordinary. The voicemail has a timestamp, but no carrier, account, or device log exists. The object in evidence is a melted handset, sealed in a tamper bag with ash fused into the cracked glass. The waveform carries a soft room tone under the voice, and that room tone matches the Bureau inspection table. The evidence room has no cellular repeater, no active speaker, and no device capable of receiving a call. Ask the obvious question: why did nobody notice it the first time? Here is the part that made the Bureau stop treating it like noise. The archive copy appears before the intake log is signed, with the voicemail already transcribed in the margin. By the second review pass, the Bureau had 3 copies of the same event. One came from the live recorder. One came from a sealed cabinet. One came from a source that should not have been able to transmit anything at all. The call is not coming from the network. It is being recorded from inside the sealed bag. Then, it answers. The case rule is simple. The voicemail only changes after a new listener touches the evidence tag.
The evidence looks harmless until it isn't. Dust on a table, a light in a window, a needle moving without a hand near it. That restraint is why the case stayed open. Nothing performs for the camera. The room simply changes its mind. So what changed? The coordinate embedded under the voice points to the storage shelf where the phone will be moved tomorrow. That is where the story tilts. The Bureau evidence room stops being a location and becomes a test. Every instrument points somewhere plausible. Every human statement points somewhere else. The evidence board splits into 3 columns. The first column is mechanical. Serial numbers, room temperature, timestamps, custody marks. The second column is human. What the night staff heard, what they refused to write down, and which light stayed on after the recorder stopped. The third column is the one the Bureau never shows publicly, because it tracks what changed after each replay. On the first replay, a burned phone sealed in a clear evidence bag behaves like damaged equipment. On the second, it behaves like a transmitter. On the third, it behaves like a witness correcting the official record. That progression matters because it turns a strange object into a chain of custody problem. The Bureau isolates the file in a clean room. No network, no wireless card, no external speaker, and a fresh recorder with a blank index. The sound still arrives with the same low pressure under it, but the silence around the sound is different, as if the new room has been added to the recording. And this is where the room stops feeling passive. One analyst marks the moment the case stops being passive evidence. It is not the loudest moment. It is not the most frightening moment. It is a tiny delay before the next tone, a pause just long enough to feel like the file is waiting for the Bureau to catch up. The physical scene around the Bureau evidence room never becomes spectacular. That is what makes it worse. No door slams, no impossible figure crosses the frame. The proof is smaller, a shadow that should belong to equipment that is not there, a meter needle settling before power returns, a tag number printed 1 line too early. The public reconstruction uses only the safest fragments,
but even those fragments create a pattern. Every time the Bureau removes context to make the case easier to explain, the remaining evidence becomes more direct. The file seems to punish simplification. By mid-afternoon, the archive team tests a control phrase. They write down a sentence that is never spoken aloud. The next recording does not repeat the sentence. It does something worse. It leaves a gap, exactly where the sentence would fit. That gap becomes the case's fingerprint. Not a voice, not a symbol, not a threat. An absence with consistent timing, carried from device to device as if the missing part is the message. The final detail is small. That is why it works. The voicemail is not arriving through the network. It is being recorded from inside the sealed evidence bag. The Bureau tried to reduce the file to equipment failure, but each clean room replay carried one extra detail from the room that had just played it. The public copy removes the worst part. The private copy keeps it. The event behaves less like a transmission and more like a memory deciding which machine should hold it next. The final message names the next person scheduled to open the bag.
The file is sealed as a burned phone voicemail with listener index behavior marked active. If the phone rings again, the Bureau may not be receiving a message. It may be becoming one. The next file begins when an archive mirror shows a lighthouse before the fog arrives,